This decade throws out the excess and brings Marvel's first family back to basics, making it more accessible for new readers. Let's talk about Fantastic Four comics in the 2000s. The transcript for this essay is available on my website, witsandpod.com. After writer Chris Claremont departs the series, Carlos Pacheco returns to write and draw the book. His involvement feels like a soft reboot for the series, making it more welcoming for newer readers. It blends the cosmic exploration and mundane family elements pretty well, and throws out the excess of the last run. Classic 60s FF and the John Byrne era are clear influences in these stories. I loved Pacheco's 2 issues of the original FF run. He shows up and clotheslines readers and the series with this modern, fluid, dynamic look that broke away from FF's house style and even redesigns the costumes. From the first page, Pacheco and his co-writer Rafael Marin seem to get the FF. This run has pretty much an all-Spanish creative team with Pacheco, Marin, and inker Jesus Marino. One strength of this run is how it takes a forgettable villain like Diablo and makes him into a credible threat. Also, this man says Orgy of Destruction, which is one of the most creative threats from an FF villain. The first arc delves into Diablo's origin, showing him being hunted through Spain over time for his tyranny and practice of alchemy. He's able to subdue the entire FF, but gets taken down by his own hubris. Also, as far as I know, this is the run where Ben stopped smoking cigars. We find out about an organization called the Gideon Trust. Gideon is a deep cut to an FF villain from the 60s. This group wanted to buy out Pier 4 so they could get access to the FF's Negative Zone portal. They want to mine the Negative Zone for profit! A new character is introduced with Noah Baxter, who built the original Baxter Building. He's one of Reed's mentors, and even hooks the FF up with a brand new Baxter Building that he built in space. In Fantastic Four 38, writer Jeff Loeb joins the book. The run still uses Pacheco and Marin's plots and scripts, however, Loeb is adding the dialogue. I can't say what exact role Loeb had outside of that, since there were subplots before his involvement still in effect, like the Gideon Trust. Some of Pacheco and Marin's scripts are available to see the differences in the final product. Okay, I never thought they would do it. In this run, Pacheco brings back one of the most terrifying Fantastic Four villains, one even more terrifying than Doctor Doom and Galactus. Paste Pot Pete. He's hired by the Gideon Trust to go after the FF and mine the Negative Zone for resources. It's not even played for laughs, and Pete gets his licks in against the FF. When Ben, Sue, and Reed are trapped in the Negative Zone with some cosmic pirates, Johnny forms his own FF with She-Hulk, Namorita, and Scott Lang's Ant-Man. A multiverse arc ends with Franklin losing his powers and future Valeria being erased. Issue 49 ends with Sue being pregnant again, where Franklin used the last of his reality-bending powers to give Sue Valeria back. The explanation is so convoluted, I'll just leave this panel up for a second. Fantastic Four aficionado Karl Kesel takes over dialoguing Pacheco and Marin's plots with issue 51, with Mark Bagley on pencils. Kesel and Alve do inks. This run ends with one of FF's most diabolical issues, featuring Johnny enlisting Doctor Doom to help Sue deliver her baby, while Reed is being held prisoner by some rogue Inhumans. In return, Doom gets to name her Valeria after the woman he loved. This is arguably the run I've recommended the most to get people into the Fantastic Four. This isn't just the Mark Waid run, it's Waid, Mike Wieringo, and Karl Kesel's run. Wieringo's art style is so fluid. He modernizes the world with a clean style that has a lot of heart and emotion, making the characters move on the page. There are 3 artists that come to mind when I think of Ben Grimm. The King, of course, Ron Wilson, and Mike Wieringo. For characters that have been around for a while, there are certain artists who can tap into what makes that character tick and cement the new look for the era they're working in. Kesel's inks are so instrumental to this run that if Wieringo is inked by someone else, it's noticeable, which is not a criticism of other inkers. It's just to show how well Waid, Wieringo, and Kesel gel together in this book.
An inker, like a cinematographer, a good cinematographer, helps enhance the vision of the person he's working with. So a good inker will enhance the vision of the penciler he's working with. and hopefully, not work against that vision.
Waid writes like this is the first run of FF ever. It doesn't fall into egregious callback territory, doesn't require any homework. Right from the first issue, it shows why the FF are as impactful as they are.
Reed's big secret is that the reason they wear these outlandish costumes, the reason they have these names like Mr. Fantastic or the Invisible Woman, the reason they're in the middle of Manhattan in the Baxter Building rather than in a cave somewhere, the reason that they're merchandised and the reason they're celebrities is because Reed created that machine. And he didn't do it out of any sort of ego. He did it out of the sense of, I've taken these guys up in my rocket ship and I've ruined their lives. I've made them freaks. I've made them the kind of people who the government will pull them apart and they will live the rest of their lives as science experiments unless I do something to give them purpose, to give them a reason to get up in the morning. So he created this giant machine of celebrity around them, and it has the illusion of, oh, the FF, don't they think they're great? They've got the big marketing giants behind them. They got the action figures and stuff. But the reality of it is Reed trying to give them something that resembles a normal life.
This run is so heavily focused on the relationships between the FF that it doesn't force big events, and there aren't too many new characters shoehorned in. It's working with these 4 core elements and trying to tell a heartwarming story. Sue tasks Johnny with running Fantastic Four Incorporated so he can grow up a little. This run has the infamous moment where Dr. Doom turns Valeria, the woman he loved, into an armor and proceeds to send Franklin to hell. This version is out for blood and doesn't care who is in his way. It's a departure from the regal Doom from past stories. There's a point where Doom captures the FF, leaving Reed on his own. The only way to save them, with Doctor Strange's help, is for Reed to accept his limitations and ditch science for magic. With comics like this, I don't want to break down every single moment. I usually say how I prefer people going out and checking out the actual books and developing an opinion themselves. And yeah, these comics have been around for a long time, but not everyone has read them. There are moments when the Fantastic Four meet God that are better experienced firsthand because it's done so wholeheartedly. The run ends quietly with the FF showing Galactus the benefits of humanity while embracing their powers and role as Imaginauts. Each character has such a distinct voice and personality, and this run shows that the FF are a package deal. Each one of them brings something to the table that contributes to why the label World's Greatest Comic Magazine still resonates. Karl Kesel takes over writing duties after Waid for issues 252 to 256. He shows up for these brief but thoughtful stories that understand the core of these characters, short and sweet with a lot of impact. J. Michael Straczynski takes over writing and is paired with artist Mike McKone, with Andy Lanning on inks for Fantastic Four number 527 to 541. The JMS McKone Lanning run isn't the best starting point, but is a pretty solid follow-up to the Waid era. While the previous run balanced out all the characters, this is the most Reed Richards heavy run so far. He's almost the main character. It explores the character as a family man, a leader, a scientist. This is someone whose brain has no limits, but he's still grounded and wants to help as many people as he can. It's unfortunate how this Reed character study had the Civil War event shoehorned into it. McKone balances the quiet moments and cosmic action insanely well. Ben has a subplot where he comes into money with more zeros than even Reed can count, so he's off actually having a good time for once. This run connects directly to the Waid run and brings Doom back in the most casually vengeful way. McKone and Lanning's pencils and inks make the Doom scenes memorable, even though he doesn't have many appearances. The most impactful moment of this run focuses on how Reed and this cosmic being called the Entity go back to the very beginning of everything, as JMS tweaks the origin so that Reed is partially responsible for the Big Bang and bombarding the Fantastic Four with cosmic rays. Stories like this show how Reed is so instrumental in the biggest parts of Marvel's storytelling. The fact that he's willing to understand everything but is still grounded and helps people is what separates him from villains like Doom, Mad Thinker, or the Wizard. Outside of the Civil War tie-ins and the fact that the run is unfinished, Straczynski clearly cares about the characters and shows a lot of reverence towards Reed. He had to work around an event instead of focusing on his character-focused story. This is a guy who's a massive Jack Kirby fan and even interviewed the King in the 90s. It's the quiet character building moments that showcase the FF's humanity that make the high points of this run. I won't cover Civil War in depth, but did want to cover how this event broke up the FF and changed Reed's character for the worse. In Civil War, Reed sides with Tony Stark's pro-registration group and helps round up heroes, basically becoming a prison warden, which causes Sue and Ben to leave while Johnny is in a coma. The tonal shift of the JMS run is so jarring when it's forced to cross over with Civil War in the last few issues. Not once, but twice, Reed has spoken with the government in the past about his support of superheroes, which goes against his Civil War role. Back in Walter Simonson's run, the FF spoke out against another Superhuman Registration Act, similar to the one in Civil War. Reed just isn't a character who would build a negative zone prison to lock up heroes. The second instance happens in issue 52 of the Pacheco run, where he speaks up in support of the Inhumans, Thor, Silver Surfer, and other superhuman beings who are threatened with deportation from Earth. JMS has spoken up over the years that he wasn't a fan of how Reed was depicted in the event. It's that he couldn't change the direction because it's how the character was written for Civil War. I'm really excited to talk about Dwayne McDuffie's work again. This is a short run, but a nice change of pace from Civil War and a breather before the next run. In his first two issues, McDuffie writes a conversation between Johnny and Reed, showing why Reed's characterization in Civil War didn't work. While this whole run doesn't focus on Civil War, McDuffie does use it to do some damage control for Reed and the FF. He has Reed and Sue go on vacation, replacing them with Black Panther and Storm. McDuffie's art collaborator for this run, Paul Pelletier, joins the series with issue 544. Reed's Room of 100 Ideas makes an appearance in Civil War, but McDuffie and Pelletier show Reed tinkering in there often during their run. The run ends with the current FF going up against their future selves, where Reed reveals to his past self that he's going to solve everything and achieve world peace through his 101st idea. Future Doom also comes back and they send him to a reality without Reed's. While this run doesn't get too much coverage, it does plant some major seeds that are used in the often discussed Hickman run. No hate to Hickman at all, his run is incredible, but he gets credit for certain things he didn't do. Jack Kirby, John Byrne, and Dwayne McDuffie are the ones who show that Reed solved everything. Hickman is the one who explores how Reed gets there. It's not stated in the comic, but this all ties back to the first appearances of Rama Tut and Nathaniel Richards talking about how Reed is responsible for peace that lasts far into the future. So Dwayne McDuffie and Paul Pelletier's run ends with issue 553, which is also the last FF cover Michael Turner would produce. Number 553 came out in January 2008, with a March 2008 cover date. Turner would pass away too soon in June of that year after battling cancer. McDuffie is so good at pulling all these niche plot points from older stories, but incorporating them in a way that doesn't force readers to have a doctorate in comics. It isn't intimidating for newer readers, but is rewarding for those familiar with the nitty-gritty. Writer Mark Millar and artist Bryan Hitch take over with the summer blockbuster take on FF. One of the biggest plot points of this run is that Reed's ex from the Claremont run returns. She tells Reed that she and her husband are working on a new Earth in case this one is destroyed. Later, she finds out that it's really just an escape plan for Earth's rich people while everyone else gets left behind. The other big subplot is a group called the New Defenders led by Hulk's son. Millar connects this story to his Old Man Logan arc, having Hulk Jr. be a descendant of the Hulk gang. It turns out the real New Defenders leader is Sue Storm from the future, who brought her team back in time using Galactus as a time machine to find a new home because the old one was destroyed. Millar sends this team to New Earth after they casually kidnap and torture Johnny and Doom and fry Galactus. Valeria gets a pretty big role in this run. We see her Reed-level intelligence manifesting, where she wasn't able to speak in previous runs. It causes some drama between her and Franklin, who lost his powers during Pacheco's run. One cool design aspect is that in Fantastic Four 563, the story summary page gets turned into Valeria's blog. So she's the one summarizing the story up to this point. Arguably, the most important parts of this run are the scenes where Hitch and Millar focus on developing Franklin and Valeria and making their personalities distinct from each other. where Franklin has a boundless imagination and Valeria is focused on the science of the real world, like Reed. Jonathan Hickman's run starts with 570, which comes out mid-2009, so I'll cover his whole run in the 2010s video. In previous videos, I've done my 10 stories I'd recommend to new readers, so here goes. Fantastic 436, the second issue of Carlos Pacheco's run. He finds a way to make Diablo actually menacing. There are some references to the Byrne run, but Pacheco takes it in his own direction and dives into Diablo's roots through his Spanish lineage. Dynamic and fluid art style that's a little unnerving at times. The FF are being held down by thousands of little demons as Diablo tortures them. Personally, I'm a fan of Pacheco's FF costumes as well. Fantastic 456, a heartwarming Karl Kesel issue focused on the Thing going back home to Yancy Street, diving into his upbringing and his Jewish heritage and connecting him to the myth of the Golem, who isn't a monster but a protector. Solid for new readers, but it's rewarding for readers of Thing's 80s solo series too. The Stuart Immonen pencils with Scott Koblish inks are gorgeous. Immonen has done random stints on FF over the years, but it's never enough. Fantastic 460, the first issue of Mark Waid, Mike Wieringo, and Karl Kesel's run. Creates the word Imaginauts as explorers of imagination, and establishes an ideal starting point for new readers. This issue is so dense and can almost be read as a one-shot. It introduces the characters, revamps them for a more modern audience, and shows why the FF are important and why they do what they do. Fantastic Four 500 features a cover by future Waid Daredevil collaborator Paolo Rivera. Doctor Strange plays a big role in the Doom arc and teaches Reed about magic. Reed has to come to terms with his limits and embrace magic, which helps him save his family from Doom. Reed's magic word is worth the price of admission. Fantastic Four 509 to 511. After Ben's death during the Latveria takeover arc, the FF travel to the afterlife to get their friend back. I don't want to give it away, but the FF meet their creator and find out the importance of the journey and not the destination. It's a refreshing arc that shows the FF always have new stories to tell and pays respect to the people who started this journey. Fantastic Four 520, this is the start of Waid, Wieringo, and Kesel's Galactus arc, where Johnny becomes the new herald. While it's a Torch-focused issue, it goes into how others see Johnny and how he impacts others. We see how Ben and Sue view Johnny as a friend and brother. It's an issue that shows what Johnny brings to the FF and how he's the one who keeps things normal and down to earth while bringing some levity. Definitely a must-read Torch story. Fantastic Four 532. One of the highlights of JMS and Mike McKone's run is the focus on Reed Richards. This issue leans into Reed's need to understand everything. A creature named the Entity gets Reed's help to go back to the beginning of time. It's there that Reed and the Entity become part of the Big Bang. By doing this, Reed becomes the reason the FF gain their powers from cosmic rays. It dives into Reed's mind and how he remains grounded because of his family and desire to help the world. It's a fresh retelling of the origin that pushes the characters forward. Fantastic Four 537, Doom returns from Hell after the Waid run. Probably his most impactful return. He has no weapons, no magic, his armor is falling apart. He crawled out of hell fighting an army of demons with his bare hands, talking about how awesome he is. All to try to pick up Thor's hammer, which doesn't work out for him. Fantastic Four 541, one of the better elements to come out of Civil War. Ben goes to France and meets up with a bootleg version of the Justice League to go on some Silver Age adventures, calling back to a time when things weren't as dark or edgy. Also the final issue of the JMS run. Fantastic Four 545. This issue has an insanely deep cut. T'Challa calls back to his first solo series by his co-creator Jack Kirby. Dwayne McDuffie and Paul Pelletier bring back King Solomon's time-traveling frogs, so Black Panther goes fully 1970s Kirby to help take down Galactus. Forget it, I'm throwing an 11 for this one. Fantastic Four 564 to 565. The FF go to Scotland to meet Reed's sketchy cousin Hamish for Christmas. This steps away from FF's cosmic stories and morphs into a mystery with Atlas monster elements thrown in. It turns out Hamish has been feeding his townspeople to a creature named Corgo in exchange for a sickness and poverty-free town. Franklin and Valeria get to team up and save the day. On top of bringing FF back to basics and modernizing the series for a newer audience, this is the decade of Reed Richards. There were some Marvel Knights FF series during the 2000s I didn't cover: Marvel Knights 4, Hard Knocks, and Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4. The Grant Morrison and Jay Lee story is probably the better known one, and it's pretty crazy. Marvel Knights 4 is written by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa with art by multiple artists. I'd at least recommend the first arc with art by Steve McNiven, where the FF run out of money and have to leave the Baxter building. It's a down-to-earth take on the FF where they get day jobs, like Ben starts working in construction. I'm only covering the main FF series, and since Marvel Knights is its own imprint, that would be its own video. I did want to mention Paul Mounts, who is the main FF colorist of this decade through the early 2010s. He's colored over 100 FF issues. As always, the essay transcript and all of my other videos can be found on my website, witsendpod.com. If it's not on there, it ain't me. Share these essays around. Thanks for checking out my work. Chaos ensues. Up next, taking a sharp turn into Ultimate Fantastic Four, then back to the main series.